Do you take it for granted that you will still be alive tomorrow? That very assumption may be stealing today from you. Samurai 400 years ago did the opposite. They began each day by imagining their own death. That may sound dark, but it was not. Samurai lived in order to die. You may have heard that before. Many people misunderstand this. Even Japanese people do. But the real meaning was almost the opposite. To think about death was a way to live more deeply in the present. I grew up in Japan, surrounded by Japanese culture and history from childhood. So in this video, I want to introduce the words left by samurai of the past as carefully and as close to their original meaning as I can. Something is always taking our minds away. Chased by the things we must do, today slips by before we notice it. One casual remark from someone will not leave our head. We compare ourselves with others and feel rushed or discouraged. We wonder whether we should stay where we are, and we treat our time with the person in front of us carelessly. All of these happen when we have lost sight of where to place our mind. 400 years ago, samurai faced the same problem, but their situation was far more urgent than ours. In the very next moment, they might lose their lives. That was the world they lived in. That is exactly why they thought so seriously about it. Where should I place my mind? How can I stay calm and settled in a world like this? We today rarely worry about whether we will be alive tomorrow. Even so, 400 years later, their answers still help us. In this video, we will look at those 5 teachings. By the end, you should have a few small ways of thinking that you can use from tomorrow. Let us begin with the first teaching. The way of the warrior is found in death. This is one of the most famous lines from a book called Hagakure. It is said to be the words of Miyamoto Tsunetomo, a samurai of the saga domain, written down by Tashiro Tsurumoto. If you read only this one line, it may sound as if samurai admired death. In fact, in later times, this phrase was used as a slogan in war. But that was not what Tsunetomo was trying to say. He goes on to say this: morning and evening, if a person can calm the heart and live as if the body is already dead, that person gains freedom in the way. By thinking about death, you become free. In simple terms, it means this. What if your life ended today? When you think that way, you can finally stop spending time on things that do not matter. You can become free from fear, from pride, and from hesitation. What is interesting is that Tsunetomo himself did not follow his lord in death. The lord he served, Nabeshima Mitsushige, had forbidden his retainers to follow him in death. When the previous lord had died, many able retainers had taken their own lives to follow him. Mitsushige is said to have hated that great loss. So Tsunetomo was not allowed to die. Instead, he became a monk, lived in a quiet hermitage, and spoke the words that became Hagakure. Hagakure is not a book about dying in a glorious way. It is a book about how to live and how to do one's duty in a time of peace. In our world today, it means this. Of course, we cannot simply throw everything away. Even if today were our last day, we still have to live. We have work. We have family. We have things we must do every day. But that is exactly why the question changes. If today were my last day, would I still use this time in the same way? Ask yourself that question once in the morning. You may not be able to change your day, but you may see it differently. Say the thing you keep not saying. Let go of a small anger that does not really matter. Speak a little more carefully to someone important to you. And there is one more thing. We put things off because we believe tomorrow will come. I will do it tomorrow. I will think about it next week. And so we keep pushing our decisions further and further away. Hagakure also records this teaching. 7 breaths of thought. It means that when you decide something, you should decide within the space of 7 breaths. Tsunetomo introduces this as the words of people from an older time. Thinking for longer does not always bring a better answer. More often, hesitation grows. We start looking for reasons why we cannot. We build a careful excuse for not acting. So 7 breaths. Decide within that time. And maybe ask yourself, gently, if today were my last day, what would I do? Thinking about death is not a dark thing. It is a way to take back today. A day we may have treated carelessly because we assumed tomorrow would come. Here is the next teaching. Have you ever had one casual remark stay in your mind all day? 400 years ago, a Zen monk gave an answer to that problem. His name was Takuan Soho. He wrote a letter to Yagyu Munenori, the sword instructor to the shogun's family. That letter is known as Fudōchi Shinmyoku. Takuan was not simply a quiet monk. He once openly opposed a policy of the shogunate. He objected to a government decision about appointments in Buddhist temples. As a result, he was sent into exile in a distant province. He did not fear power. He said what he believed. And it was this monk who wrote to a master swordsman about the nature of the mind. Fudōchi. The word means an immovable mind. Here, many people misunderstand it. They think an immovable mind means a mind like stone, a mind that feels nothing. They think samurai erased their emotions. But Takuan was saying the exact opposite. He taught this. Do not let the mind stop on one thing. That is Fudōchi. Takuan gave a beautiful example. Imagine you are looking at a tree. If your mind stops on a single leaf, you no longer see the others. But if you fix your mind on no single leaf, you see them all. Every one of the 1,000 leaves. The mind that stops on one thing loses everything else. This is what Takuan wanted to teach. Do not let the mind stop anywhere. When the mind holds on to nothing, it can move anywhere, freely, like water. That is why he called it immovable. Not a mind that cannot move. A mind that nothing can stop. That was true calmness. In our world today, it means this. A casual remark from someone, a comment on social media, a small mistake at work, a message that never comes back, a bad mood from a boss or a colleague. It may be only one small event, but it can stay in your head and take over the whole day. At that moment, your mind has stopped there. The important thing is not to feel nothing. It is not to become a person who never gets hurt. If someone says something hurtful, you feel hurt. If something unexpected happens, you feel anxious. That is natural. But do not let that feeling hold you. Do not give your whole day to one word, one mistake, or one fear. Fudōchi does not mean erasing emotion. It means feeling it, and still not being held by it. When something hurts, do not tell yourself it is nothing. It is not nothing. Let yourself feel it. But then, remember one thing. This single event is not your whole day. That comment, that mistake, that one message. It is real. But it is one leaf, not the whole tree. You do not have to push the feeling away. You only have to remember that there is more than this. The people beside you are still there. Tomorrow is still there. And slowly, the mind begins to move again. The third teaching comes from Miyamoto Musashi. When you hear the name Musashi, you may picture an undefeated swordsman, a master of cutting people down. There is one duel that made his name famous. It was his duel with Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryujima. According to tradition, Musashi deliberately arrived late for the appointed time in order to disturb his opponent's mind. It is also said that he fought with a wooden sword made from a boat oar. Of course, some of these details may include later storytelling, but the important point comes after that. This swordsman, praised as undefeated, left behind words of a very different kind at the end of his life. About a week before his death, Musashi wrote a short set of 21 rules called Dokodo. The title means the way of walking alone. In it, we find lines like these. Do not go against the way of the world. Do not hold on to old tools that are no longer needed. Do not regret what you have done. These are not techniques for cutting people down. They are teachings about how to discipline oneself. And in his most famous work, The Book of Five Rings, Musashi writes this. Today, I defeat the person I was yesterday. He was not looking at anyone else. What Musashi left in his later years was not a story of flashy victory. Do not be trapped by what is unnecessary. Train yourself. And little by little, go beyond the person you were yesterday. That was how he lived. In our world today, it means this. We often compare ourselves with other people. People of the same age. People who seem successful on social media. People who get results faster than we do. That person has already come so far. But I am still here. When we think like that, we become anxious or discouraged. But the person Musashi told us to compete with was not someone else. It was yesterday's self. Have I moved even a little further than I was yesterday? Have I tried one thing that I could not do yesterday? Have I learned even one small thing that I did not know yesterday? That is enough as the first comparison. Of course, in the real world, there is competition. At work, in study, and in creative work, we are sometimes compared with others. But if you only look at other people, you stop seeing yourself. And when you cannot see yourself, you cannot move. The Book of Five Rings, which Musashi left in his later years, is not only a book about bright and dramatic victory. It teaches something simple and hard. Every day, test your skill. Every day, polish it a little more. You do not need to demand great success all at once. Have I moved even a little beyond yesterday's self? Only those small steps become a real path. That is what this swordsman from 400 years ago still teaches us. The fourth teaching may be a little unexpected. When people think of samurai, they often imagine a man who serves one lord for his whole life. But the reality of the Sengoku period was different. Historians point out that the relationship between lord and retainer was much more practical. It was close to a contract, based on mutual benefit. You served your lord as long as it helped you too. That was the kind of relationship it could be. One figure represents this age very well. His name was Saito Dosan. In later times, he came to be known as the Viper of Mino. He became a symbol of Gikokujo, the lower overthrowing the higher. This was not an age when a person's value was decided only by birth or family name. This age lifted the strong and pushed the weak aside. That was the reality of this age of war. Let me introduce one more man. His name was Todo Takatora. He too began from a low position, close to an Ishigaru, a common foot soldier. In the end, he became a great lord, ruling land that produced more than 300,000 koku of rice. One koku was said to feed one person for a year, so his land could feed 300,000 people. Along the way, he changed lords again and again. There is a saying passed down about Takatora. A warrior is not a true warrior unless he has changed lords 7 times. This saying shows us how samurai thought at that time. Make your own path. Move to a better place. That was not something to be ashamed of. We picture samurai as blindly loyal. But that image was created later, in the Edo and Meiji periods. Real samurai were more independent than that. Of course, we must be careful. Akechi Mitsuhide betrayed his lord and brought down Oda Nobunaga. But soon after, Mitsuhide himself was destroyed. As the phrase, 3-day rule suggests, betrayal without support does not last long. That, too, was reality. In our world today, it means this. Serving a company or an organization is not a bad thing in itself. There is great value in working in one place for a long time and building trust there. But sometimes we use that as an excuse. We stop looking at ourselves. If I stay in this organization, I will be fine. I am valued here, so I must have real ability. And while you think that, you stop asking, could I make it outside? But the question never really goes away. It stays with you as a quiet unease. And because that unease is there, you hold on to where you are even more tightly. You do not stay because you chose to. You stay because you are afraid to leave. Is there any freedom of the mind in that? Sharpen yourself. Know your own value. Then choose, with your own eyes, where to give your strength. For samurai, choosing whom to serve was choosing how to live. Loyalty does not mean obeying an organization. Because you chose your lord yourself, you can serve him truly. And now, the final teaching. In Japan, there is a phrase called Ichi-go, Ichi-e. It means that this meeting, in this moment, happens only once in a lifetime. Even if you meet the same person again, the exact same time as today will never return. So we should value this one meeting. That is the meaning. To be honest, these 4 words only became widely known in the 19th century. It was not written exactly like this in an old samurai text, but samurai lived this spirit through the way of tea. Sen no Rikyū, the great master of tea, lived in the age of Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. At that time, tea was not just a hobby of drinking tea. For warlords, it was culture. It was a place of meeting. And at times, it was also a place of politics. But at the center of tea was not power. It was thinking of the other person. Before the guest arrives, the host prepares the tea room. The host chooses utensils that fit the season. The host arranges flowers. The host boils the water. On a hot day, the host tries to make the room feel cool. On a cold day, the host tries to make it feel warm. If it may rain, the host prepares for that too. Much of this is not visible to the guest. To think of someone in a place they will never see. That was the hospitality of tea. And before samurai entered the tea room, they removed the swords from their waists. Status, conflict, and weapons were all left outside for a while. Inside that small room, host and guest faced one another before a single bowl of tea. Why did warriors who lived in an age of war value such a quiet time? Perhaps they knew something. To sit with another person without conflict, that was not something to take for granted. The time you spend today with the person in front of you will never return in the same form. That is why it must not be treated carelessly. Ichi-go, Ichi-e does not simply mean value the present moment. It means doing what you can now for the person in front of you. In our world today, this is not only about a special tea room. When you eat with someone, when you meet someone for work, when you have a short conversation with family, when you send one message, do you rush through it and move on to the next thing? Or do you hold one small thought in your heart? This conversation will never happen again. You may meet this person again tomorrow, but today will never come back. When you hold that thought, something changes on its own. You listen a little more carefully. You imagine what that person might be carrying today. And you do something small for them, without letting them notice. I believe that is close to what Ichi-go, Ichi-e means. Samurai were not people who sought only strength. They lived in an age of war, but they also knew how to think of another person, quietly, without being seen. Strength and kindness, having both. That was the samurai way. Let us look back at the 5 teachings. Think of death and live now. Do not let the mind stay in one place. Defeat yesterday's self. Become independent in your own life. And give your mind to the person in front of you. These are not matters of special talent. They are not matters of strong will either. You do not need a stronger will. You need to see things differently. The words samurai left 400 years ago were not about armor or swords. They were answers to a very human question. How should we live? And those answers still live inside us beyond time. Tomorrow morning, if you have even a little room in your heart, try just one thing. Ask yourself this. If today were my last day, what would I value? That one question may change your day a little. Thanks for watching. On this channel, I'll keep sharing the real face of Japan. Its history, its culture, and things that might surprise you. If you find anything in this video that differs from what you know, or spot a mistake, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below too. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. Your knowledge makes this place more interesting. If you enjoyed it, please like this video and subscribe. Thanks again, and see you next time.